Work session item, sorry, Sarah, add it to your future items.
I'm going to call this special meeting of the Board of Education at the Tipp Exempted Village Schools to order. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Add it to 3 pages, is the core.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Fox, call the attendance, please.
You have Amber Drum absent this evening. Teresa Dunaway,
Present.
Rick Mames,
Present.
Simon Patry,
Here.
and Zakor.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. We may begin the meeting.
To my due authorization here, 1 second. No.
You need a paper copy?
No. The first item is to adjourn to executive session. Executive session under G1 to consider the appointment, and dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official, or in the investigation of charges or complaints against a public employee, official, licensee, or regular individual, unless the public employee, official, licensee, or regular individual is requesting a public hearing. The potential invitees include, but not limited to, Mark Stefanik, Ellie Fox, Dr. Tuttle Huff, and the Board of Education's attorneys, and official action may follow the executive session. Is there a motion?
I move.
Motion by Mrs. Zakor, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Maines. Any discussion? Any discussion?
Well, it's not my turn, it's theirs. No, I'm. Yeah, I just have some basic discussion. If we're gonna, have waste taxpayer money, and I say waste because it's wasting if we don't, follow the attorney's counsel, legal counsel advice. But my other issue is if we go into executive session and the board the majority of the board makes a decision, then that should be followed out. To do anything less than that, or not being a board, or being a dictatorship.
Point of order, Mrs. Dunaway, the current motion is.
I understand, and I'm only going to go into executive session if we all do what is agreed to in executive session. For one person to decide they're going to go against the majority of the board decision, then why are we going into executive session? It's a waste of taxpayer money to have attorneys on the phone. Makes no sense.
Anyone else? Mrs. Fox, please call the vote.
Zakor,
Yes.
Mames,
Yes.
Dunaway,
No.
Patry.
Yes. We're now entering into executive session. The time is 5:34 p.m.
school.
We're now turning out of executive session and resuming the regular portion of the special meeting. The time is now 6:58 p.m. Next item for new business is a fraud risk assessment. Recommended action is approval authorizing all Board of Education members to fill out and submit fraud risk assessment questionnaire submitted to President and all other board members on January 24th, 2023 by the House State Auditor. The fraud risk assessment questionnaire is attached. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Motion by Mrs. Dunaway. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Maines. Any discussion?
I need to read this again. When does it due?
So this is the fraud question.
Yeah, we get it yes, yeah.
But so I'll let you go first, but I've got some information if it's.
I just wanted the due date.
Well, we're past the due date. The recommended action, unless you're gonna amend it, is on January 24th.
They served it to us.
Yeah, we got this a while ago. That's why I'm
We
confused.
didn't get it a while ago. We got it.
Well, through 2 or 3 weeks.
We got it. No, I don't think we got it after our last board meeting.
I felt like I read this a while ago.
I filled it out and submitted it
Okay,
already.
you already did yours, okay.
So if it's all right, I can provide some clarifying remarks, Mrs. Dunaway.
Yeah, no, I'm good. Go ahead.
We got the email on January 24th, which was after our last board meeting. So when that happened, I let Mr. Stefanik know we need to put that on the next agenda. When I did that, Mr. Stefanik relayed to me that the auditor has changed they used to send it to the board president and the administration, and they changed it to sending it to every board member.
2022.
Yeah, this for 2023 for the 2022 year. But last year, when we had this discussion related to it, the board had kind of agreed that there wasn't authority to do it. And so I think the auditor's on the impression we should have authority to do it. So to be safe, my thought was to add this to the agenda, approve it for everybody to go, and then maybe maybe refer this to our policies committee, just add that this is something that is just automatically done by the board members, so we don't have to put it on our agenda. So that was the thought behind it. That now, Mrs. Dunaway, you had before.
No, I'm just confused because in the past, it was always the superintendent, treasurer, and board president. So the auditors changed it in 2022. So now every board member can fill one out. So we all received it. So anyone can fill it out. I guess I was just confused why this was on the agenda. I'm just.
Because last year, it was the board's opinion that when it was communicated solely to me, I didn't have the authority to do it unless the board authorized it. Then the board authorized me to do it. Then yes, that's exactly what happened. Then the board authorized everyone to do one. And so it seems that their thought to fix that issue, because we actually created an issue for the auditor's office. Like our school district was notable in this regard. And so I think we may have been the impetus for the communication to all board members that's occurred this year in 2023.
Well, that makes me proud.
Well, I'm not sure that we were in. I'll wait.
That's what was relayed to me by Mr. Stefanik. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But the bottom line is, because last year there was a consensus that I didn't have the authority, my thought was get it on a meeting as soon as possible, authorize everybody just to be safe. Then let's get it to and just make it part of our policy, and then we don't have to do this anymore. So does that answer your question of why that's on there?
It doesn't matter. Honestly, I'm fine.
I filled mine out and I'm
Just
done.
fill the form out and
All right,
end of story.
I'd like to comment.
go ahead, Mrs. McCord.
If you're using this motion, then that needs to be amended because it's supposed to be submitted to the president on January 24th. Obviously, we're past that date.
I'm sorry.
And I don't even know that we need that. But as a recap from last year, I think some of the information that you just stated, Mr. Patrick, was not accurate. Because what we did last year, to my recollection, is the board authorized, took a vote publicly for the president to fill out the form, which in fact the president did and submitted it. And then the contention came after that because what the president submitted was some accusations that were his opinion that was never discussed as a board. And so I think that's where the dissension came into play. And also in that process, I remember we took a vote and authorized or asked the prosecutor, which is our statutory counsel, their input, who fills that out. And if I remember correctly, that stated that any board member can fill it out. It's, it's not defined.
Yeah, I don't recall. I think you're refreshing my recollection related to the prosecutor's letter. I don't remember the gist of it. This was my attempt just to make sure that we were fully in compliance and not causing any issues. Just a point of clarification, Mrs. Zakor, it's not to be submitted to me on January 24th. It's when I received it on the 24th. It's also my understanding that all board members received it.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's the way this is written.
No,
Submitted to president on.
yeah, the questioner submitted that was submitted to me on the 24th. So it's the same one that you all received as well. And it's approving all more board members to fill out. So there's the motion itself is not deficient. Go ahead, Mr. Maines.
May I make a motion to approve authorizing all Board of Education members to fill out and submit the fraud risk assessment questionnaire to the state auditor?
You already have, Mr. Maines, you seconded that motion.
Okay.
Is that okay?
So any other discussion? All right, Mrs. Fox, please call the vote.
I'm sorry, so it was first by the first
The first was by Mrs. Dunaway.
Dunaway.
Was it Mrs. Zakor?
in the means.
No, I didn't say it was me.
Mrs. Dunaway and then second by Mr. Maines.
Read the motion again, please.
It's the recommended action is to approve authorizing all Board of Education members to fill out and submit the fraud risk assessment questionnaire submitted to President on January 24, 2023 by the Ohio State Auditor.
Dunaway,
Yes.
Maines,
Yes.
Patry,
Yes,
Zakor.
Yes.
motion passes. Next item is 4A supplemental positions. So when the reason I called a special meeting was primarily related to this issue. Just want to give the body a little bit of background. When we tabled this, we neglected to realize, or when we took it out of consent, out of the consent agenda at the last meeting, we neglected to recognize that when we tabled the rest of the items and it ended the meeting, and it created a logistical issue for the athletic programs. The most significant one, it's my understanding, it's been relayed to me, I think, by Mr. Stefanik, is that there's a track meet this weekend, and not approving this before that would cause some hardship on that event. And so based on that, I called a special meeting. I also then added all the other items because I thought if we have everybody here, we can knock out some work before the work session. As well-intentioned as that may have been, what I did realize is that Mrs. Drum is out of town, and these were technically tabled, I think, to the next work session. And so
Regular scheduled meeting, correct.
yeah, and so this is not a regular scheduled meeting. The purpose of this meeting, though, is very much for the supplemental position, so I think I would have carved that out. But my suggestion to the board is that we act on the thing that we need to act on, which is supplemental positions, and then I think we need to consider maybe tabling the rest of these so when all board members are present. But
We have a quorum.
that's fine. It's
Yeah,
just,
we have a quorum.
but the board technically tabled to the next meeting. I made the mistake of adding all of them now, or the next regular meeting. And so, that's my bad. I just don't want to have someone lose their voice. But right now, with that introduction in place, the first item is 4A supplemental positions, recommend actions approval to employ the following staff for the 2022-2023 school year, pending proper certification and paperwork. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Maines. Is there a second? I will second. Mr. Maines, any discussion?
No.
I have none. Anyone else?
No, not for me.
I do.
All right, Mrs. Dunaway.
Yeah, so how does the board want to handle this? Because we have had issues where we hire, the board approves this as is, right? So then a coach decides they're going to move a varsity coach down to JV or JV up to varsity. And in my opinion, they can't do that. It's board approved as is. So last year in the spring sports, we had a coach that did that. And in my opinion, it was completely unacceptable. And if the coach was going to do that, then he needs to come back in and say, hey, I'm moving this coach down to JV, whatever the
Can I get a
reason
point
is,
of
and then the
clarification?
board votes again.
Mrs. Dunaway,
Sure.
does this relate, what
Yeah,
you're
this
talking
is
about
spring
is from
sport.
last year,
It happened in there.
but does it relate to this slate of candidates, and is it applicable to this
Those
motion?
people are on this paper. They were approved this way last year, and then a coach took it upon themselves to reallocate those positions, and that's not what you do. Then that has to go back through the board, and it has to be board approved.
So I guess what you're saying, you're
You
requesting.
can't have 5 varsity coaches and then turn it into 3 varsity coaches and 7 JV. That's not the way it's board approved.
What you're requesting is a point of clarification related to whether this is subject to modification by the board without board
Correct.
action. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
We never discussed that. It's never come up before. So I was just curious what the process is.
Normally, they would give us a resignation.
Something,
and then we would add
and we
that back
revote.
on,
Right. So I just want to make sure. So if it happens again this year, I would hope that, Mr. Kramer has some type of meeting with his coaches saying, hey, once coaches are board approved, they are board approved. You don't have the ability to reassign coaches without going through the board.
Well-
So, go ahead, Simon.
No, go ahead.
No, it happened last year and it shouldn't happen again. It's unacceptable.
Well,
But that's not what we're voting on.
but it's
But I want
it's sort of,
clarification though,
so,
because it happened with the spring sports last year.
so I get what Mrs. Dunaway is asking. So Mrs. Dunaway is saying, when we approve this, or this motion here that we're approving
Yeah.
today,
Does it really have any?
is it, no, is it,
Should.
does it provide, or is it permissible for coaches to be reassigned that have been approved to a lower level?
Or higher.
Or higher.
This was lower.
And I think that's a good question. I don't know whether we have an answer as to whether that's permissible or not, but it makes sense to me that if we're approving it in this function or this direction, that it likely requires another board action to change it. And
If the
so,
board's okay, I'll send Mr. Stefanik an email to get clarification from Mr. Kramer. You guys are okay with that? And just have us all copied on it?
yeah, because maybe there's something out there that
Yep.
says you can, and if not,
I've never heard of
then
it. So
it's possible that there were some missteps made based on past practices or something, and we can educate people.
Yep,
on
I'll send
the
Mark an
issues.
email. Thank
But
you.
from my perspective, it makes sense that it would require further board action.
That's exactly what I thought.
So when we're voting on this, from my perspective, this is the list, and if it's gonna get changed, there would need to be a
Back to
request
the
to the
board.
board, yeah.
That's exactly how I understand it. So maybe just a little training process with the athletic director.
Yeah, and,
Yeah.
there's sometimes things happen, but, so any other discussion?
I'd like to add something.
Mrs. Fox?
I understand in my office, that would be a big no-no because then we would be paying someone
Mhm.
incorrectly because, head coaches are paid differently than assistants.
Sure.
So I don't,
Well, it's
That
not
probably would be
assistant,
good to
it's a
follow up.
JV. It's not
No,
necessarily.
she's making a point that
well, and I don't know about JV versus varsity.
And I guess I don't know whether.
I don't know
JV is
without looking
considered
at
a
the
head coach,
salary.
but You can have a head JV coach and a head.
Yeah,
varsity.
usually we're real careful about what step and
Yeah,
class. and
That's a
all
great
that
point.
stuff.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure if that happened, that
Yeah.
we would make sure it was corrected.
All right, Mrs. Zafor.
And I like having somebody in the audience that's directly involved with so much. The supplemental staff coaching, but there is also non-athletic, non-athletic positions here as well.
Oh,
Regardless, I mean, they're on the list and are these athletic supplementals, are they unit members? Can you answer that, Mr. Hoffman? or-
I cannot answer that.
You don't know? See, I don't either. And I was just wondering is how does that, that's interesting. You know, I'd like to know as well. But I would assume logically that what you vote on, then that's what it needs to remain until it's been voted to be changed.
All right, any other discussion? All right, Mrs. Fox, please call the vote.
Maines,
Yes.
Patry,
Yes,
Dunaway,
No,
Zakor.
Yes.
motion passes. Next item is 4B, board meeting schedule review. Before that goes forward, I would make a motion to table the rest of these items until our next meeting, so that Mrs. Drum can be part of the meeting. When I called a special meeting, it was well, I've already identified that. So that's my motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Maines. Just want to reiterate, Mrs. Drum, I think really desires to be part of the discussions on all these other items. This was initially scheduled for our meeting on Monday, or that's what it was tabled for. I called a special meeting specifically for the supplemental positions. I thought, again, well-intentioned to try, I just assumed that we'd all be here because we don't miss meetings very often. I didn't think about the potential consequence of accidentally cutting somebody out and having their voice not heard. I think that it's important that Mrs. Drum gets a voice in all these items, unless it's an urgent issue. And so for that reason, I think it's worth tabling these issues. That way, every board member can be heard on these issues. Mr. Mays, did you have anything? No. All right. Anyone else? Mrs.
you
Zakor?
can go first.
Well, I really disagree because number one, you have just spent the taxpayers' money to convene this meeting. Number two, I understand ideally, yes, you like to have all 5 members present, but it's just simply not a requirement. And governance goes on. And and the third thing I want to say, many of these items were at the request of Mrs. Dunaway. They were her items. And then finally, we have an item 4J, a letter that needs to be generated. And so I'm just kind of surprised that we would be defaulting this. I think we're here that we should address some of these things, and I don't see it as being that lengthy to do.
Mrs. Dunaway?
Yeah, so I wish you would have had the same compassion. We had a 4-member or a 5-member board. What topic was that, Ann? I forget. We voted on
Counseling
something.
contract.
Oh, yeah.
Counseling contract.
With Nexus Counseling, 4 board members, it ended in a tie. And so the contract was denied. And then Simon, you put it back on and said your reasoning, which was
5 members.
which was not okay. Yeah. You said, I'm going to put it back in front of the board and we're going to get a 5-person board to vote on this because it's very important to our community. Well, you voted on that Nexus contract. You took Ann and I out of the equation and there were only 3 people. So where was your compassion when Ann and I did not have a voice on the Nexus? I have been extremely passionate about that guidance contract since the day it got started. So, wow. Ann and I, our voice is not important, but you're really concerned about Amber not being here. That's not okay.
Anyone else? I could be wrong, but I don't recall that Nexus contract was a special meeting. That's the distinction here, is that was a regular scheduled meeting from my recollection. If that's wrong, then, then I'll stand corrected. But the items were specifically tabled, not revisited, or not brought forth before the board. And that's another distinction. And so these were all tabled less than 2 weeks ago.
These were started in July and August of last year.
These were tabled by this board less than 2 weeks ago, on January 23rd, rather. And to be before this board on the upcoming Monday. And so I think there's distinctions there, and I would take exception to the comments that one of the members of the board just made relate to any motive I had. Anyone else? Mrs. Zakor?
Yeah, I'm really not following any of this train of thought. This agenda was already announced to the public. And because it is a special meeting, I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know that we have the, if we're on solid ground by convening the meeting under this context of with the agenda items, and then getting here and saying, oh, we did 2 or 3 and now we're gonna quit. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't know that that's wise. And when these got tabled, I don't recall, I don't know that is so strictly construed and confined to be at a quote regular meeting. Why is this becoming a concern? This is just really setting me back. And what the heck is going on here? You set the agenda, you announce the agenda. Now we're here, we have a quorum of 4 people. We have a lot of things ahead of us at that work session, regular meeting. And so why you wouldn't want to start disposing of some of this stuff and move forward. I'm stymied.
Thank you, Mrs. Zakor. Mrs. Dunaway?
Yeah, your rationale doesn't make sense, Simon. You're worried about one member's voice not being here, which is Amber, but you didn't have an issue with Ann and I not voting on the Nexus contract. Mental wellness is such a huge thing right now and has been in our district the whole 8 years I've been on the school board. So none of these items that Mrs. Drum is missing out on were as important as Mrs. Zakor and I's no vote on the Nexus contract. So I motion for the vote, Mrs. Fox.
Mrs. Dunaway has called the question. Mrs. Fox, please state a vote.
I'd like to hear the vote, please. The motion read back.
The motion is to table the rest of the items.
I'd like Mrs. Fox to read it. I think it's the,
No, I'm the chair.
but yeah, she's the one recording.
All I listed was table the remaining items. I was quickly typing, so I have description of all your conversation, but
The motions that I made is to table the remaining items until the next meeting. That was seconded by Mr. Maines. That's a question before the board.
And the non-renewal,
I'm already motioned for the vote.
She's called to the question.
Yeah, that would include the non-renewal,
Now, you can certainly,
tabling all items.
I move to amend that motion.
and is it to take
Already
out
motion for the vote.
item J?
Yes.
I will second your motion to amend the tabling to remove item 4J.
And I think that C needs to be approved. We already had a conversation with some sources about the timeliness.
I'm sorry, I seconded too quickly. So your motion is to remove items 4C and 4J from the tabling motion. Is that correct, Mrs. Zakor?
Yeah, as a rescue effort. Yeah, that is correct.
I will second that motion. Any further discussion on the amended motion? Mrs. Fox, the question before the board is on an amended motion, which is to table items 4B, 4D, 4E. So it's to amend the motion to table solely for B, D through I. Sorry. Yeah, that's right. D through I. Keep J on and table item 4K. So if the motion passes, The items that would be remaining before the board are the prior meeting minutes, as well as the non-renewal letter for the superintendent. Okay, Mrs. Fox, please call the vote.
Zakor,
Yes.
Patrick,
Yes.
Dunaway,
No,
and Maines.
Yes.
Motion passes. Items 4B, items 4D through I, and item 4K are tabled. Next item before the board is item 4C. Prior meeting minutes, January 4th, 2023 emergency meeting. Recommend action is approval of the minutes from the January 4th, 2023 emergency meeting. Is there a motion?
I move.
Motion by Mrs. Zakor. Is there a second?
second,
Second by Mrs. Dunaway. Any discussion? Mrs. Fox, please call the vote.
Zakor,
Why do you have a discussion?
I'm sorry, is there a discussion?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I missed this step. Go ahead, Mrs. Zakor.
Yeah, just real quick, there were several omissions as well as a couple dates that were incorrect on this. And so Mrs. Fox, I believe, has corrected those. I read your revisions. And so, yeah. Because we had initially January 4th, 2022. Just a year behind it. We got that corrected. And then there were some very key things in the minutes that were announced prior to going into an executive session that I think were really crucial to have in here, that we stated that there could be board action taken, and we stated who we were inviting in, and those things had inadvertently been left off of the prior meeting minutes. So I think we captured it now.
well, thanks for catching those.
You're
You're
welcome.
very good at that.
You're welcome.
yes, I thank you too, as well.
You're
No,
so
thank-
good at that.
Thank you, Mrs. Fox, for, it's a big job, I know.
Thank you.
There's a lot going on.
Right. Thank you.
That's all I have to say.
Anyone else? All right. Mrs. Fox, please call the vote.
Zakor,
Yes.
Dunaway,
Yes,
Maines,
Yes.
and Patrick.
Yes, motion passes. Next item is item 4J, non-renewal letter for superintendent.
motion,
There's not, it's just, right, there's nothing precluding you from making a motion at this point. It's just a letter. It's just an item with,
it says letter to be sent by February 14th, 2023.
it's not, there's no recommended action. If you wish to make a motion
We can have it. Yeah.
or you wish to discuss it, I know it's your item, Mrs. Dunaway, please feel free. You have
Yeah.
the floor.
Motion for President Patry to send a non-renewal letter to Mr. Stefanik by noon tomorrow.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion before the board is a motion to instruct / authorize. Is that fair, Mrs. Dunaway?
Sure,
Board
just
president.
authorize.
Motion
Motion to authorize
All right,
President Patry.
President Patry to send a non-renewal letter to Mr. Stefanik by noon tomorrow.
Noon tomorrow.
I move to amend that.
Okay,
To send, to authorize Mr. Patry to send this, and I would like to use a specific language, to send a written notice of a non-renewal letter to superintendent by
noon tomorrow.
noon
Yeah,
tomorrow,
it's very simple.
or by the end of business day tomorrow. What your schedule's like.
It was your amendment, so it can't be both.
Okay,
So you
okay.
pick one.
Now read that to me again, Ann.
Yeah, pick
too.
one.
I'm sorry. I want to make sure.
The board authorizing Mr. Patry to send written notice of a non-renewal letter to the superintendent,
No. Not written notice, of a non-renewal, just written.
written
notice.
notice in the way of a non-renewal letter to the superintendent by
Midnight, no, I'm joking.
yeah,
Come on, that's funny.
I'm just trying to think of his timeline, that's all.
I have a point of clarification.
Go ahead.
say written notice and letter, would
Yeah.
electronic correspondence such as email be satisfactory?
I
Or
believe so.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Correct,
I would,
absolutely.
Unless somebody wants to amend it, I'm gonna say by noon tomorrow, but that's,
is there a second? So the motion by Mrs. Zakor to amend is the motion to authorize President Patrick to send a written notice of a written notice in the way of a non-renewal letter to Mr. Stefanik by noon tomorrow.
Worded weird, that was worded kind of oddly.
non-contract, I think the word contract is word over. Non-renewal contract.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I may have
That's
written it
redundant, it's a
incorrectly. So
non-renewal.
Patrick to send written.
Specify its contract.
How about contract non-renewal? That sounds better.
Yeah.
If you leave,
Contract non-renewal sounds better.
if you leave, may I?
Yes,
Yes, sure.
Absolutely.
Motion authorizing President Patrick to send written notice of non-renewal of contract to Mr. Stefanik by noon tomorrow.
Perfect, yeah.
Yes.
We got rid of that weird
Agreed.
letter. That weird letter didn't sound right there.
Okay, so now,
Zakor
just
made-
so that we know, the motion by Mrs. Zakor is motion authorizing President Patrick to send written notice of non-renewal of contract to Mr. Stefanik by noon tomorrow.
Perfect.
Is there a
That's good.
second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Dunaway. Is there any discussion? All right, Mrs. Fox, please call, I'm sorry, everybody raise their hands. Or Mrs. Fox, please call the vote.
Zakor,
Yes.
Dunaway,
Yes,
Maines,
Yes.
Patrick.
No. Motion passes. And I think that concludes the business with the tabled items. Next item is our adjournment. Just informational purposes, our next meeting will be on, it's not on here,
It's Monday, 13.
Monday, February 13th at the Board of Education office at 6 p.m. With that, I would
motion,
entertain a motion for
adjourn, motion to adjourn.
Mrs. Dunaway's motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Okay, keep going. No second. Let's get back to those tabled items.
I will second the motion.
Tabled items, bring them back up.
Mr. Mays,
Golly.
it's now a time honored tradition, but that was long, buddy.
Yeah.
All right.
I was
so
ready to get on to the
you
superintendent.
have lost. So it
Let's
is,
go to those papers.
I support Mr. Mays.
it is
Let's go
now,
to those papers.
it is Dunaway and Patrick for the motion to adjourn. Any discussion? Mrs. Fox, please call the vote.
Dunaway,
Oh, yes.
Patrick,
Yes.
Maines,
Yes.
and Zakor.
Yes.
Motion passes. We are now adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not a big deal.